In the quiet village of Omuhuma, cradled by red earth roads and golden savanna fields, stood a lonely hut beneath an ancient baobab tree. To the casual passerby, it was like many others: mud walls, thatched roof, a cooking pot outside. But to the people of the village, it was a house of whispers. Some claimed they heard a lullaby float through the air on moonless nights. Others swore they saw the fire rekindle itself after dusk, despite no one being inside. The villagers, with their deep respect for the spiritual world, had long stopped questioning. They said, simply, "That is where the child lives. And where her mother comes home at night." The child in question was Chidinma, a soft-spoken girl of 6 years. With wide curious eyes and a habit of laughing alone under the tree. She had no siblings. No father anyone could remember. And her mother, Adaora, had died during childbirth, right there in that hut. Yet somehow, the child thrived. She was never seen begging for food, though she had no visible means of support. Her clothes were always clean, though no one washed them. And at night, a gentle light was said to shine from the cracks of her door, though no lamp was ever lit. When elders were asked, they would lower their voices and say, "The spirit of Adaora has not left." A mother's bond is stronger than death. This is the story of love that lingers, of a spirit that would not rest, and of the unseen hands that cradle life in the darkest hours. This is the story of the mother who returned. The sky over Omuhuma was an ominous gray on the day Chidinma came into the world. Heavy clouds pressed down on the village. And the air smelled of iron and earth. Wind stirred the dust into restless spirals, as if the spirits themselves sensed what was about to happen. Inside a modest hut at the edge of the village, Adaora lay sweating on a mat of woven raffia. Her face, once vibrant and full of laughter, was now pale with pain. Her limbs trembled as the midwife, Mamanwaka, barked commands to the young women helping her. "Water. More cloth. She's bleeding too much," Mamanwaka shouted. The child inside her was stubborn, reluctant to leave the womb. Hours passed. The sun rose and began to fall. The chanting of concerned neighbors outside turned into hushed silence. The elders sat by the fire, burning herbs and whispering to the ancestors. Then, as dusk fell and the first stars blinked into the heavens, a baby's cry pierced the air. A girl. Small, but fierce in voice, as if angry at the world for what it had taken to bring her forth. But Adaora was silent. Her eyes stared at the thatched ceiling, unblinking. Her chest did not rise. Mamanwaka lowered her head, tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. She gave her life for this child. The baby was wrapped in a cloth that once belonged to Adaora, yellow with faded red patterns. She was placed beside her mother's still body for a final goodbye. But something strange happened. As the last ember of daylight vanished, a warm breeze, impossibly soft, blew through the hut. The baobab outside rustled though no wind was felt in the rest of the village. And for just a moment, the cloth covering Adaora's face lifted slightly and then settled again. Mamanwaka looked around, eyes wide. She was old and had seen many births and deaths, but never had she felt the presence so clearly, so powerfully. "She is not gone," she whispered. "Her spirit has lingered." The village gathered to mourn. Adaora was buried near the baobab tree, as was the custom for those who died in childbirth, a sacred resting place. Believed to be watched by the mothers of the spirit world. No one claimed the child. Her father had died in a fishing accident before she was born. Her relatives were scattered or long gone. The elders debated what to do, but Mamanwaka stood before them, straight as a staff despite her age. "The child must stay in Adaora's home," she said. "She will be watched over." They agreed. Though none dared say who, or what, would be doing the watching. And so, Chidinma, whose name meant, "God is good," was left to be raised in a hut by the baobab tree. under the watchful gaze of something not entirely of this world. As weeks passed, strange signs began to appear. Fresh water would be found in the calabash each morning, though no one had filled it. Her clothes, hung to dry by a neighbor, would be neatly folded on her doorstep, cleaner than they had been. At night, a faint lullaby could be heard. Not sung by any living voice, but carried by the wind in Adaora's exact tone, soft and lilting. Some called it a miracle. Others, a haunting. But the elders of Omohuma, wise in the ways of the spirits, said this. When a mother dies with unfinished love in her heart, she becomes more than memory. She becomes guardian. She becomes shadow and wind. She becomes spirit. Little Chidinma, too young to understand loss, smiled often. She played with sticks, sang to herself, and never cried for food. She would sometimes stare at empty space and laugh, as though someone invisible was making faces at her. And on some nights, just before sleep took her, she would say aloud, "Good night, Mama. I love you too." The people of Omohuma stopped questioning. They only watched, and waited. For everyone knew, the spirit world never reveals all its secrets at once. The baobab tree that stood over Adaora's grave was no ordinary tree. It had stood for generations, so old that the elders said it was planted before the village of Omohuma was founded. With its thick, gnarled trunk and outstretched limbs like a grandmother's arms, the baobab was known as awakens, the sacred witness. It was beneath this tree that Chidinma would sit every afternoon. She would talk, hum, and even pause as though listening to someone speak back. At first, the villagers thought she was playing with imaginary friends. But the more they watched, the more unsettled they became. Sometimes, she laughed too loudly, at nothing. Other times, she tilted her head, listening intently to the air, and then nodded like someone receiving instructions. Once, Obi, a skeptical young man from the neighboring village, passed by and mocked her. "Who are you talking to, little one?" "Your ghost mother," he said, snickering. Chidinma turned to him with eyes far older than 6 years. "She says not to mock the dead. Or they might whisper your secrets." Obi's smile faltered. That night, he woke screaming, drenched in sweat. He claimed he heard a voice breathing near his ear, repeating a childhood secret he had never told anyone. He never mocked Chidinma again. That tree, sacred and rooted in both the physical and spirit worlds, became the child's sanctuary. She would lean against it and close her eyes as if falling into a dream. Birds did not perch on it. Snakes avoided its base. Even goats would walk around it rather than under its shade. The village elders paid attention. One day, Elder Madu, the oldest living man in Omohuma, visited Chidinma beneath the baobab. He was blind in one eye and walked with a carved cane adorned with the symbols of the ancestors. He sat beside her in silence for a long while. Then he spoke. "Child, do you know who watches over you?" Chidinma looked up at him and smiled. "Yes. She's always here. Can you see her?" Chidinma nodded. "She's beautiful. But she looks sad sometimes." Elder Madu's lips pressed together in a line. He took out a small pouch from his wrapper and sprinkled powdered kola nut around the base of the tree. Then he began to chant. The language he used was ancient, one only the elders and spirit talkers understood. As he chanted, the wind picked up, swirling leaves in a circle around them. The sky darkened, though there were no clouds. When he finished, the wind died instantly. Chidinma reached out and touched his hand. "She says thank you." Elder Madu blinked. "She speaks to you now." "She always has." That evening, Elder Madu called a meeting of the council beneath the central irako tree. Only elders were present. No women. No youth. Just those who had walked with death and returned with stories. He spoke in a low, serious tone. The girl is not alone. Adaora's spirit remains. Not as a shadow, not as a curse. But as a guardian. The others murmured. Some nodded. Some looked disturbed. But this, Madhu continued, is not usual. The dead may visit in dreams. They may linger for a while. But they do not stay. This is something else. What does it mean? Asked Elder Uchenna. Madhu's one good eye stared into the fire. It means Adaora's love was so strong, her soul refused the river. She did not cross to the land of the ancestors. She rooted herself here. In that tree. In that house. For the child. Silence. Finally, Elder Ngozi spoke, voice trembling. Then we must protect the child. For she is watched by one who sees both worlds. And so, from that day forward, no one questioned the strange happenings in Chidinma's home. When her door opened on its own, they nodded and whispered blessings. When food appeared from nowhere, they left offerings at the base of the baobab. And when the night grew especially still, and the soft hum of a woman's lullaby drifted across the fields, the villagers simply said, "She is still with her." But in the realm of spirits, balance is law. And where one soul refuses to rest, others may stir. Deep beneath the earth, in the shadows between worlds, something ancient and jealous began to awaken. Because even in the spirit world, not all beings are loving. And some do not like when one of their own breaks the laws of death. The air in Omohuma changed. It began subtly, like a shift in the taste of the wind. The birds grew quieter. Dogs barked more at night. Children clung tighter to their mothers at dusk. The baobab tree, once a place of gentle silence, now creaked and sighed even on windless days. And Chidinma began to wake up crying. For the first 6 years of her life, she had never wept in the night, not once. Not even as an infant, say the villagers. But now, almost nightly, her sobs would echo from the hut. Mama Nwaka, who lived nearby, rushed in one evening to find the child curled in a ball, trembling. "What is it, child? Tell Mama Nwaka." Chidinma pointed to the darkened corner of the hut. He was there. Who? She hesitated, voice barely above a whisper. A man, but not a man. He had no eyes. Only smoke. Mama Nwaka stiffened. She turned quickly to the doorway and sprinkled nzu, white chalk sacred to the ancestors, across the threshold. Then she pulled the child to her chest. "Shoo, my baby. You are not alone. Your mother is here." But Chidinma shook her head. "Mama didn't come last night. I called. She didn't come." That same week, Elder Madhu summoned the other elders again. They met under the irako tree in the dead of night, holding burning herbs and speaking only in the tongue of the ancestors. "There is a shift," Madhu said grimly. "Something has crossed the veil." "Could it be a wandering spirit?" Elder Ngozi asked. "No. It is old. Older than any of us. Older than the village." Elder Uchenna leaned forward. "You believe, it is Obiaji." The name fell heavy into the night air like a stone into a well. Obiaji, the one who waits beneath. A spirit of exile. Banished by the high divinities long ago for trying to rule both the living and the dead. He was said to dwell in the cracks of reality, hungry for what was never his, love, legacy, and remembrance. And now, something had stirred him. The elders understood quickly. Adaora's refusal to cross fully into the land of the ancestors, her lingering soul, had bent the laws that separate the living from the spirit world. It had created a tear. And where love held open the door, other things might slip through. Elder Madhu stood and struck the earth with his staff. "Then we must seal it." Meanwhile, Chidinma was changing. She grew quieter, her laughter rare. Her eyes darted at shadows. One morning, Mamanwaka found all her drawings torn apart. When asked why, Chidinma said, "He doesn't like when I draw Mama." The baobab tree also began to wither, just slightly, but enough for the villagers to notice. Its lowest leaves turned yellow. Its bark, once smooth and warm, grew coarse. And then came the dream. One night, Chidinma fell asleep under the tree. In her dream, she stood in a vast empty plain, with black earth and no stars in the sky. A cold wind blew. Far in the distance, she saw her mother, glowing faintly, reaching out. But between them stood the man with no eyes. He turned to her, and his mouth stretched wide, not in a smile, but in hunger. "You are mine now," he said. "She cannot protect you forever." She screamed herself awake. The next morning, she refused to speak. Her skin felt cold. Her eyes, those bright, curious eyes, seemed dull. It was clear to all, Chidinma was fading. The village held its breath. Mothers clutched their children closer. Offerings were left not just for Adaora, but for all the ancestors, begging them to act. And in the spirit world, Adaora knew what must be done. She had lingered too long. To protect her child again, she would have to cross beyond the threshold no soul had ever returned from. She would need help. She would need to call upon forces older than grief and deeper than love. She would have to descend far beyond the veil of the living world, in a place where the winds sing in forgotten languages and time has no meaning. Adaora stirred. She was no longer a woman of flesh and blood, but not yet a shade fully accepted into the land of the ancestors. Her essence drifted in the twilight realm, tethered only by love, a love too strong to release. But now, something darker had crossed into the space between worlds. Something that sought to claim her daughter. And Adaora knew, love alone was no longer enough. She had to act. In the twilight realm, spirits do not walk. They do not speak as we do. They move by intent. They think with memory. And they speak with presence. Adaora began her descent by calling the old names, the sacred words whispered to her by her grandmother during her days as a child. Words of invocation, of surrender, of strength. O mothers beneath the river, hear me. O daughters of the fire ash, walk with me. O ancestors of the unforgotten, stand before me. As she chanted within her soul, the world around her began to shift. The gray void thickened, and shadows formed, a path leading downwards, made of forgotten footsteps and unspoken promises. The path to the dwelling of the deep ones. Few spirits dared descend this far. Here dwelt the ancient guardians of the afterlife, the Azemuo, the great keepers, beings carved of fire, smoke, and earth. They were not gods, but older than any shrine, older than the oldest tree in Omuhuma. As Adaora approached, three great figures emerged before her, featureless and immense. One burned like a living flame. One was wrapped in black feathers. The last was a mass of stone and root, glowing from within. They spoke not in voice, but with vibration and force that shook her essence. You have lingered too long. Why do you descend, daughter of dust? Adaora stood firm. For my child. You were meant to cross the river. You defy balance. Because my love is stronger than the river. A pause. Then the one of feathers moved closer. What will you offer to restore the balance you broke? Adaora closed her eyes. The answer had burned in her since the moment her child cried for the first time. My name. The figures stilled. In the spirit realm, to give up your name is to lose your individuality. Your memory, your chance of ever being remembered in ritual or prayer. It is to cease existing. You offer your legacy. Yes. And in exchange, Give me strength. Let me face the one who waits beneath. The spirits turned toward one another, and a gust of spiritual wind rose, carrying chants from thousands of mothers long past. Then, without warning, they vanished, and Adaora collapsed, falling through layers of shadow and cold. She descended not into fire, but into silence. A deep, endless stillness where even the dead dared not linger. And there, at the center of that void, stood Obi-Aji, tall, skeletal, with robes that moved like smoke and a face that was both man and void. He turned toward her with slow delight. You should not be here. I go where my child is threatened. She will be mine. Not through harm. Through forgetting. You cannot protect her from time. Adaora stepped forward. Her soul burning with the blessings of the great keepers. Then I will not let her forget. I will become her shadow, her wind, her lullaby. I will be the drumbeat in her dreams and the whisper in her bones. I will be the echo of every woman who ever died for her child. Obi-Aji hissed, stepping back, the shadows recoiling. He raised his hand, summoning the weight of sorrow and death. But Adaora spoke again, this time not in defiance, but in sacrifice. I give my name. Let me be unremembered by all but her. And with those words, light burst from her being. Her name, Adaora, faded into the winds of the spirit realm. The stories she once lived dissolved. The songs that carried her memory vanished from the tongues of her people. Only Chidinma would remember her. Only Chidinma would carry the name in her blood. Obi-Aji screamed, not in pain, but in frustration, as her light pushed him back. The darkness collapsed. And Adaora fell, upward. Chidinma awoke screaming. But this time, her voice was strong, not of fear, but of fury. A wind blew through the hut, flinging open the door. The baobab tree outside cracked and groaned. Mamanwaka rushed in, and saw the child surrounded by flickering light. Like tiny flames that did not burn. Chidinma opened her eyes, and for a moment, they were not her own. They held an ancient knowing. Then she collapsed into the woman's arms, whispering one word. Mama. That night, the man with no eyes never returned. The tree's leaves turned green again within a week. And though Chidinma never spoke of the visitor again, she sometimes sang lullabies no one had taught her, in a voice that did not belong to any child. The villagers knew the story was not over. Because in Omohuma, the spirits do not vanish. They wait. They watch. They love. In the weeks following that night of wind and firelight, Chidinma slowly returned to herself. The laughter came back, though softer. Her eyes, once dulled by fear, regained their sparkle, but it was the sparkle of someone who had seen too much too young. The villagers said she had walked with spirits and returned. And in a land where the invisible is as real as breath, such words are not spoken lightly. Yet something had changed, subtly, and not just in the child. The great baobab tree began to bloom. Baobabs do not flower often. It can take years, even decades. But one morning, just as the sun spilled gold across the red earth, the villagers awoke to find pure white blossoms covering its branches. The elders stood in silence before the tree, eyes wide. Someone powerful now sleeps in these roots, Elder Madhu said. No one needed to ask who. Meanwhile, Chidinma continued to grow, watched closely by Mamanwaka, who had unofficially taken on the role of caretaker. But even she would admit, quietly, and only to the ancestors, that the girl seemed to be raised more by the unseen than the living. The calabash at her doorstep still filled itself with clean water each morning. Her hut swept itself clean, there was never a spiderweb or fallen leaf inside. And though no one ever saw her bathe, her skin always smelled faintly of ylang-ylang flowers. Just like her mother used to wear. One day, as Mamanwaka braided her hair by the fire, she asked gently. Do you still see her, child? Chidinma smiled without turning. She is not someone I see. She is someone I carry. But what lingered strongest was the name. Adaora had given it up. Her story erased from the mouths of mortals, her memory scattered like ash in the wind. And yet, Chidinma remembered. Not in the way a historian remembers. Not in words or lineage. But in sensation. She remembered the hum of a voice no one else heard. The way her shoulders felt warm when she cried. The scent of roasted maize drifting into her dreams. One day, while playing by the baobab, she pressed her small hand against its trunk and whispered. I don't know your name anymore. But I know your love. That's enough. And far away, in a realm beyond color and shape, a ripple passed through the spirit world. The Azemuo, ancient keepers of balance, paused their eternal watch. One of them, cloaked in feathers, murmured. She remembers. Even without the name. Years passed. The hut remained humble. The tree grew taller. And the village of Omohuma came to see Chidinma as something set apart. By the time she was 10, she had learned to hear when a storm was coming before it touched the sky. At 12, she found a lost child by dreaming of his location. At 15, she stood over a dying elder, held his hand, and said. Your mother is waiting. You can go now. He died with a smile. But the villagers never tried to worship her. They left her alone, offering quiet respect. Because to them, she was not a priestess or goddess. She was simply the child of the spirit. The girl raised by love stronger than death. And on the night of her 18th birthday, the sky opened wide with stars. A soft wind danced through the village, brushing skin like a familiar hand. That night, Chidinma sat alone under the baobab and lit a single candle. She spoke into the night, her voice steady. I do not know your face anymore. Or your name. But I know your lullabies. I know your warmth. And I know you gave everything so I could live. So I give you this, in return. My life will be yours. My strength, your memory. And as the candle flickered, the petals of the baobab blossoms fell around her like silent snow. One landed on her shoulder and did not blow away. The next morning, Mamanwaka found her asleep beneath the tree. Wrapped in a warmth the old woman could not explain. But she knew, as surely as the ancestors walked beside them. The spirit had never left. As the seasons turned. And Chidinma stepped into adulthood, a quiet understanding grew within her, not just of who she was, but what she had become. She was no longer simply the girl raised by a spirit. Or the child of Adaora. She was now something more, a vessel, a bridge between two worlds. The elders noticed it first. When sickness spread through a nearby village and no herbs seemed to work. Chidinma walked among the afflicted, laid her hand on their foreheads, and whispered old words that no one had taught her. By dawn, the fever had broken. When a drought threatened Omohuma. And the priests of the river shrine failed to summon rain, Chidinma stood by the baobab tree and wept silently. 2 days later, dark clouds rolled in and bathed the land in sweet, heavy rain. The people began to call her, in reverent tones, Eneninta, Little Mother. Not because she had children, but because they knew someone mothered her still, even from beyond. But deep inside, Chidinma struggled. There was a weight she could not name. A presence always behind her, always watching, always loving, but always just out of reach. She no longer remembered her mother's voice clearly. She could no longer recall the exact curve of her smile. She had only flashes, warmth in her spine, a gentle breeze in silence. The echo of a lullaby at dawn. The name Adaora was gone, burned away in the realm of spirits, traded for power and protection. Her mother had given it up to save her. But the soul of Chidinma longed to give that name back. One evening, she climbed the hill outside Omohuma where the ancestors were believed to whisper. It was a place of silence, where even birds did not sing. There, she sat cross-legged and called out, not with words, but with her spirit. Great mothers. Great fathers. You who walk between breath and ash. You who hold names in your hands like seeds. Tell me, what name did she give for me? She fell into a trance. The sky darkened, though the sun had not yet set. Shadows circled. A warm wind stirred her hair. And then she saw her. Not with eyes, but with memory. Her mother stood in the middle of a great river, arms outstretched, glowing with a soft light that trembled like a candle in rain. But her face had no name. Chidinma cried out. I know you. I carry you. But I do not know how to call you. And then the answer came, not from her mother, but from within herself. A voice, ancient and tender, rose from her bones. Then give her a name. For you are the keeper of her legacy now. That night, she returned to the baobab tree. She lit 7 candles around its trunk. Poured libations of palm wine. Laid down the white cloth. And when the stars had fully claimed the sky, she whispered into the roots. I name you Obianuju, one who came in the time of plenty. Because though your life was brief, your love overflowed. Though your name was taken, your blessings never ceased. You are Obianuju, and I will speak you back into the world. And the baobab trembled. The wind rose suddenly, swirling leaves into a circle around her. A single flower bloomed on a high branch above her head, in the middle of dry season. And Chidinma smiled through tears. Now, you will never be forgotten. From that day, strange things began to happen. Mothers from other villages brought their sick children to Chidinma's hut, and she healed them with songs she did not know she knew. Old women claimed to see 2 figures walking in the fields at dusk, a young woman, and beside her, a glowing spirit with the same face. Children born after that season were named Obianuju, to honor the spirit who gave her name again through her daughter. Even the priests, who once scoffed at Chidinma's quiet power, came to her for dreams and guidance. And when Chidinma finally grew old, her hair white as river foam, her hands like folded cloth, she sat beneath the baobab tree one last time, and whispered. I carried you. And you carried me. And when I cross the river, I will carry you again. Then she closed her eyes. And just before her last breath left her body, the villagers say they heard 2 lullabies. One from the lips of the old woman. And one from somewhere far above, drifting down like light. Years passed. Then decades. The village of Omohuma changed, as all things do. New roads were built. The old shrines were repaired, and some forgotten. Radios replaced talking drums. Mobile towers rose beyond the hills. Children now recited alphabets in English as well as proverbs in Igbo. But at the far end of the village, past the maize fields and along the quiet red path near the edge of the river, the baobab tree still stood. Taller than any roof. Broader than any house. And far older than memory. They called it the tree that remembers. Children still played beneath its shade, though they spoke little when they were near it. Mothers hushed their babies as they passed, and elders tipped their heads in respect. For beneath that tree lay 2 graves. One, marked by a flat round stone, was said to belong to a woman who died giving life. The other, smaller, held no name. Only the carving of a spiral, the symbol for return. The villagers said that grave held a woman who never truly died. Stories about Chidinma became legend. In hushed voices, grandmothers told their grandchildren. She was born of death and raised by a spirit. She walked between the world of the living and the dead. And she gave her mother back her name. They say she could summon rain and cure fever. That she never married, for she said she was already bound, not to a man, but to a promise. That when she spoke, her voice sometimes sounded doubled, two tones, one younger and one older. Braided like water and wind. And that when she died, the baobab shed its leaves and did not bloom again for 7 years. But those were just stories. What was certain, even to the modern minds of the village's youth, was this. On some nights, if one passed near the baobab, they would hear a lullaby, soft, ancient, sung in a voice full of love and loss. Sometimes it was joined by another voice, lighter, younger, answering in harmony. No one ever tried to record the sound. No one ever disturbed it. They simply listened, closed their eyes, and gave thanks. For in the village of Omohuma, where spirits walked not in fear but in honor, it was understood that love never truly dies. It becomes wind. It becomes song. It becomes memory, held forever by the tree that remembers. Many years later, a young girl from the city visited Omohuma with her grandmother. She was skeptical of the old tales, spirits, talking trees, women who healed with songs. It was all fantasy, she thought. But something made her stop beneath the baobab. She touched its bark. She felt a pulse, faint, like a heartbeat. And then, she heard it. A soft hum. The melody was unfamiliar, but somehow, tears welled in her eyes. She turned to her grandmother. "Do you hear that?" The old woman smiled, eyes shining. "That is the sound of a mother who never stopped loving. And a daughter who never let her be forgotten." The girl listened again, heart pounding. And somewhere deep inside her, a name rose, unbidden, glowing like a secret flame. Obianuju.